Lovely. So yeah, my name's Haroon. I'm a second year GP trainee now. So I did my F1, F2, and then I went straight into GP training. And yeah, I'm giving a talk today about this program that myself and a colleague Gormal have organized, which is we've called the British Medical Electives in Pakistan, or BMEP. And essentially it's to really formalize some sort of process to allow British medical students to go to Pakistan to do a medical elective. It's quite straightforward. So what I'll do is I'll talk a bit about the general healthcare situation in Pakistan and some challenges that it faces, and then and then from those challenges arise opportunities, and hopefully some of you might be inspired to join this program to do your elective in Pakistan. If you have any questions, by all means, you can ask along the way. You can unmute yourselves, or you can save your questions to the end. I've got the chat open as well. You can raise your hand if you like. So, moving on. So, the first thing that I'd like to just address is just the general climate of Pakistan's healthcare compared to that of the UK. And I think because we can all relate to the UK, so it's a nice comparison to make. So obviously the main thing is the general wealth of the country, and as Pakistan is a developing country compared to the UK, straight away the main marker of healthcare, or the mortality of the population, the life expectancy, is significantly reduced in Pakistan compared to that of the UK. People aren't able to afford investigations, they're not able to afford treatment, and even getting to the nearest hospital might be really difficult. So access is hugely difficult. The next thing is about in terms of the resources that are allocated. If you look right to the bottom of the graph of the table, you can see that the proportion of the country that lives in rural communities compared to urban communities. In the UK, it's only 20% that live in rural communities, whereas in Pakistan, it's much greater. It's double that. In fact, it's 40% living in rural communities. And actually, all of the hospitals are centered in the cities. In the UK, again, the hospitals, there's more likely to be greater input of resources and wealth into the cities and the hospitals. However, the center of care in the UK is based around primary care. 90% of the NHS budget goes towards primary care. And if you compare that with Pakistan, the only 80% or only 20% of the healthcare budget goes from the government to primary care. And there's many studies. As a GP trainee, I'm a huge advocate for it, and there's many studies showing the importance of primary care and the correlation between primary care and the morbidity and mortality of population. So essentially, there's a real inequality in terms of the way in which resources are allocated across the country. The next thing is a general lack of knowledge and education, in terms of one quick example that springs to mind. I did my elective in cardiology, and one of the patients was someone who just had a heart attack, an MI, and he'd had his PCI stenting, and literally the day after, his wife had come in with a whole pile of paratha and some biryani, and the doctor just went mad at the patient. But they didn't know any better, and so there's a huge push that can be done from an education point of view as well. A few other aspects are, one is the communicable diseases. So Pakistan is one of the last few countries where TB is so rife, and polio is still not being eradicated. There's cholera and sort of typhoid is rife specifically after the floods. A lot of waterborne viruses have increased significantly, and we're seeing them here as well. I work in Queen's Hospital in Essex, and so there's lots of patients coming in, having come back from Pakistan on their holidays, and unfortunately they've got typhoid. So, and it's not, the thing is, it's not, unfortunately, it's not just the communicable diseases, but it's also the non-communicable diseases as well. So sort of ischemic heart disease and diabetes are rife, and it ties in with what I was saying earlier. And then furthermore, there's a few other things. So maternal and child health are generally neglected, as shown by the infant mortality rate, and even the maternal mortality rate is significantly higher in Pakistan compared to that of the UK. And then finally, there's the idea of the brain drain. So when I was on my elective, I was so surprised by how efficient and hardworking the doctors were. And they knew a lot more than the sort of F1s in the UK. But it's because a lot of them would go off in their breaks to revise for the PLAB exam or for the USMLE exam because they wanted to go to the UK or America or Australia. So actually, unfortunately, there's a huge brain drain of and doctors leaving the country for a better lifestyle elsewhere. So these are all huge challenges, but as I said, huge opportunities for us to think about ways of helping the country's healthcare system. So our vision as BMEP is that generally at the moment there's no real elective program that's set up. It's very much people know someone, or they know a family friend, or sort of an uncle who's a doctor at one of the hospitals in Pakistan, and they would just go and they'd be looked after by their relatives or whoever in Pakistan. But as time goes on, there's more and more British Pakistanis who might not have such links with Pakistan, and actually we find that our role is to help fill that gap and help put people in touch with hospitals and arrange for a complete package to for including accommodation and just making the whole process smoother, because we want to expose British Pakistani students to this healthcare system to just give a bit of interest and engagement with the country, and maybe even make a difference in the future. If you have any questions, by all means, you can ask along the way. So this is Shalimar Hospital, which is based in Lahore, right opposite Shalimar Gardens. And this is where it's a medical and dental college as well. And it's also a hospital. So we were housed. So I went with one of my colleagues, Komal, from university, and I would live in the boys' hostel, which was in sort of the defence area of Lahore, so about half an hour drive away. We'd get the local school bus or the shuttle bus that would take the university students from the accommodation to the hospital in the morning. The girls' accommodation is on this site, and so we'd attend a lecture alongside the medical students, and then we'd join the ward rounds later, and we'd be placed on the cardiology ward is where we applied to go. And so after us, there have been other students. So we went, I think, in 2017 or 2018, and then in 2018, another set of students went, and then 2019. So 2018, I think 3 girls went from Imperial. 2019, another from Oxford. In 2020, some boys went from King's. So we've had a steady flow of students going in. It's just we hadn't sort of fully formalized the process. But then COVID hit, so we've taken a bit of a hiatus. This is us on ward rounds, and there was a clinic that we would sit in on. And then there were also the angio suite as well, where we were able to watch angios. So Yeah, this is generally what we would get up to on a day-to-day basis. There were these 4 or so different places, so we'd go to either watch echoes and sort of actually do them. We'd do the ward rounds. We'd sit in the clinic, and then we would also watch the angios. We would be quite sort of proactive in terms of helping out and sort of participating in the ward rounds. But the most sort of impactful time was actually, I felt, in the clinic, where you'd see patients had come from far and wide, some taking days to just get to this clinic in order to have an appointment, which lasted only, unfortunately, about 5 minutes with the doctor. And it was just completely packed, because this was the Shalimar Hospital. It's got a private wing, but it's also a government hospital. So you could see such a stark contrast between private wing, which had LCD screens and basically like a 5-star hotel for each patient, compared to the that clinic room where patients would literally it'd be a tiny room. There'd be 40 patients inside that room, just trying to get from one end to the other. They'd have their blood pressure taken along the way. By the time they get to the end, there's a doctor waiting for them. He'd check what that blood pressure was. He'd literally maybe ask them a few questions from it for a history, but he'd have literally a couple of minutes, and then he'd just give them some meds that had been donated by like pharmaceutical companies, and then they would move on, and they'd come back 1 week later, and it was about £1 or something equivalent. So we also got up to some, I'm just going to skip that, but generally we also got up to, we also looked around for opportunities to raise money for the hospital. So we did an interview where we spoke to the lead consultant and the headmaster of the university, and they gave us some sort of opportunities to raise money as well for when we came back. And so that's a sort of side thing that we as a group for BMEP we're hoping to do, which is essentially A, arrange electives, but B, any sort of projects on the side or audits or opportunities to fundraise. That's something that we would actively encourage and support as well. My colleague Cornwall, she also went to do a placement in psychiatry the following year as well, because she loved it so much. So there's a huge opportunity, and we've got a very good we're quite well connected in that we have a lady called Mariam who works for GlaxoSmithKline, and she works for the Asia division, and she's essentially really helped us take this project forward. She's the one that got us in touch with Shalimar in the first place, and she's arranged for other hospitals to also get on board with this scheme. At the moment, we're still looking around the Lahore region, but we're hopeful for the coming years to arrange things outside of Lahore as well. So this is one of the sort of like the rehab parts of the Punjab Institute of Mental Health, where Cornwall did hers, and she saw this amazing artwork that these mental health patients were doing, just to help them return to society and civilization after. This is just a little patient story that one of the students that went a few years after us has wrote. So it was about this patient, Mrs. B, who came in with this vague symptom of uljan, which is like discomfort, and she didn't want to come in, but was forced by her family to do so. And so for her, she didn't want people worrying about her health or stretch their financial capacity, so she'd keep quiet. But then it got to a point where this discomfort was so unmanageable. And she wasn't very engaged in the interview as well. And the daughter-in-law would be speaking on behalf of her, and she and then she might sort of add in a little bit. And then she ended up, and she was given, so actually it was a cardiology clinic, but despite that, the outcome of it was that he gave her SSRIs, so antidepressants. And she basically said, oh yes, she has been given something for depression in the past, but she didn't really acknowledge it. And then my colleague who wrote this said that actually what she thought of as depression, and she said, oh well, the daughter-in-law said in passing that, oh no, everyone gets depressed sometimes. So really, the if it was a face-to-face, we could have a nice discussion about this. Does anyone have any comments on this story, or does it surprise them? Have they seen anything like this? Feel free to either write in the chat or unmute yourselves.
I think it's not surprising. There is a lot of, well, there's a massive lack of education about mental health amongst, I think, our community. And something like depression, I don't think it's given the credit and the seriousness that it deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. The mental health in Pakistan is very taboo to speak about. It's not something that's commonly even thought of. And I'm sure you've heard stories or have maybe first-hand experiences of how relatives back home might ascribe mental health diagnoses to sort of more spiritual things and jinn and things like this as well. So so when we did our elective, we went for a 4 weeks, and it was, I think, about the first week or so it was just settling in, and then for the next 3 weeks we really got quite involved, and it was really fun, really interesting to see the sort of patients and their journey through the system. Really harrowing at times when patients would come in with really end stage signs that you'd never see in this country. So like we saw infective endocarditis and we saw sort of actual septic emboli, like black fingers from the necrosis of the septic emboli. And then we would see patients that had MIs and they needed stenting, but rather than the standard, what we're used to, which is where you go to the PCI suite, you have your stenting, you have your angio, they find the vessel that's blocked off, and then they would just stent it there and then. Here, what they would do is they would do the angio, then they'd come out of the angio, then they'd ask the family, this is what's happened. Are you willing to pay X amount of money for a stent? And then the family would say, well, however much they've got. If it was a breadwinner of the family, then the hospital would have some form of charity that they would be able to contribute towards the stent. But otherwise, they would have to then choose between a stent that's made out of materials that aren't as good as others, and there's like a 5 times price difference, and one lasts X number of years, one lasts however many more years, and it's just quite difficult or sort of awful to have to see that they're having to make such huge decisions purely on the basis of cost. Yes, Shayan.
Haroon, can I ask, how much typically does a stent cost, like from the cheapest to the most expensive?
I think, I can't remember in rupees, but I think at the time the costing was around, I can't remember, I think it was around sort of 50 to 100 pounds for the cheaper one, and then sort of 500 pounds ish for the more expensive one. So yeah, when we went, these are just some points that we reflected on. So the just general insight, the contrast between the private and the government side, then financial difficulties, as I've said. There were some potentials for community outreach projects. So one of our colleagues went out and he helped raise awareness to discussion groups in the community and about diabetes awareness, which is really useful. And then we also got to meet the students of Shalimar Hospital. So we did all of the usual tourist things, went to Badshah Wazir Khan mosques and the Lahore Fort, and we did a trip to Islamabad as well with some friends that we made when we were there. It's such a beautiful country, and as with all places to travel to, there's many places to lots of hidden beauty as well. And then absolutely food is Pakistan, like food is to die for. We did make lots of friends there. It's very easy to meet new people from the university, just from accommodation and from the ward rounds and the other F1 or house officers, they're called. So that's basically it in terms of the elective. So in terms of logistics, what we did was so Mariam was our contact, and she liaised with the hospital and arranged for the placement to be confirmed and the specialty. There's a huge array of specialties that you would be able to choose from, and then they would also take care of accommodation as well, and food. I can't remember specifically how much it costs in total, but is compared to other sort of elective programs where if you were to go to, I don't know, New Zealand or Australia or the Far East, it's a very, very reasonable price. There's no cost for the actual elective. The cost is just for the accommodation and for the food. And it's basically like a couple of £100 for 4 weeks. And so it's really, really not much compared to what you'd normally be expected to pay for an elective program. And then is this placement aimed at 5th years only, or can it be done during the summer or a break? Yeah, it can. So it's as long as you have 1 year of clinical medical experience, you'd be able to go. So I actually didn't go in my elective. I went 1 year earlier. So this was my 4th year after I'd done 1 year of clinical medicine. And the only other thing, so 1 year of clinical experience, and also 4 weeks minimum. I think 3 weeks is allowed, but I don't think it would be enough for you to get a real flavor of things. Yeah, so but it's for anyone, and it's a rolling thing, so we're always available to organize it for you. We just because we can get in touch with them very easily, and we know that lots of medical schools do their electives throughout the year at different times. Some are in winter, some are in January, some are in the summer holidays. So it's really, if you just fill in this form that I'll share with you at the end, then by all means we can facilitate. Any other questions just about sort of the logistics of things?
Did you have to get travel insurance or any kind of insurance for while you were there?
So I just used the normal insurance, that normal travel insurance, nothing in particular. In terms of, I suppose, there are certain, like the MDU offers a medical indemnity or elective insurance, which costs about, I think it's about 50 quid. At the time, I don't think I was aware of it, but when I did my actual elective, then I was made aware of that. So that's something that's worth doing. All the details will come in the next, I think in 2 slides time. Fine. So then the only other thing that I would like to make you aware of is this exciting opportunity, which is essentially so we have a double role in that we are also affiliated with a charity called UK Association of Medical Aid in Pakistan, which has 4 main branches. One is disaster prevention. So in case a calamity hits like COVID or floods or whatever, then some of the funds would go to that. The second is hepatitis prevention and treatment. The third is scholarships for midwife students and medical students and nursing students. And then the final thing is water sanitation. So this is where generally we raise money for, and our main link, Mariam, who's organized or helped organize the elective program, she's actually a trustee of this charity, and it's an excellent charity in that they don't take anything for their own selves. I think they only have employed one person to run the accounts and sort of the management of everything. Everyone else, the rest of us, do everything on a voluntary basis. And what we're actually organizing at the moment is it's like a PakSoc ball essentially, but it's like a charity dinner, but it's going to be aimed at young professionals, so both students and also sort of junior doctors or sort of young professionals, recent graduates essentially, and so we're going to try and make it like an immersive experience dinner, such that it's kind of like we want to focus on the northern areas of Pakistan. So what we'll do is we'll have like projectors up of the northern areas of Pakistan, the mountains and things. So that's what I mean by the immersive experience. But it's just really to help raise money, and we've got links in Pakistan who arrange for hepatitis B vaccinations and for treatment for hepatitis C in Pakistan, and we're told that £150 is enough to prevent hepatitis, i.e. from the vaccination, and treatment as well. So that's what we're going to be targeting at this charity dinner. But as I'm sure you guys have attended such events, they do take a lot of organization. So we're also looking for anyone who's willing to help us, just giving up maybe an hour of their week to help us organize things. We've got sort of us leading the whole thing, but we're looking for anyone that's willing to join the team, and it'll just be a nice sort of committee sort of team. And really that's also for anyone who's looking to join any projects to help improve the program as well in general. So we've got really grand plans to improve quality and audit in Pakistan as well, in terms of the healthcare system, in terms of going back every year. So when a new set of students would go, they might be able to get more data, for example, on, I don't know, hand washing, or just something really subtle, but something that's really important and effective and needs to be improved. And then it's something that we can carry on working with. So this is basically a little group that we're trying to develop. So if you go on this QR code, or you can email us, or you can just find us on Instagram, but this QR code is probably most ideal. If you just fill out all of the details, then we will be able to help facilitate, and then we can also give you a lot more details of the specifics if you're interested. I'd recommend going as a group, so getting like a group of like 2 or 3 of you at least together to go on the elective, just because it's more bants, isn't it? So I'll let you look at that. So I'll leave this slide up. If you have any questions, by all means ask. We'll get back to you sort of within the next week, I suppose, because I think your deadline's coming up soon, isn't it?
Thank you.
No worries. What were the challenges, most difficult part of your elective? So I wasn't born in Pakistan. My parents weren't born in Pakistan. So my Urdu is kind of bad. So that was a bit of a challenge. It definitely got so much better when I was there. And by the end of it, I felt as though like I'd significantly improved. But that was a bit difficult. Especially when you are speaking to patients, or you're sort of around patients who might speak like village dialects of Urdu as well. It makes it even harder. But generally it was okay. But I think for me that was one of the more challenging aspects. The rest of it was fine in terms of getting around and just sort of going to the malls and things for dinner, and that's fine. That was all right.
Dr. Ahmed, could you share the slides after we're done, so then I could send them everywhere?
Yeah, I'll send out the slides. Absolutely. Any other questions? No worries, absolutely fine. It was the one thing I would say is that when you do go on your elective, I know some people want to just sort of go traveling more so than actually doing work, and but I would say do make the most of it. If you, wherever you end up going, I would say try and find some sort of small project, nothing that takes up loads of time, but just something that you can show that you've done on your elective, just so that it's just so that you feel as though you've kind of got something to show for it. And it doesn't need to be anything huge. So when I went to Cambodia for my actual elective, which was the Children's Surgical Center, that was we just made a couple of posters, really very simple posters, based on just a few patients that we'd seen with the recurrent problems, and they were like sort of like educational posters, and it's something that you can always talk about and to use in the future when you come to applying. So we're talking to a few hospitals at the moment, rather than just Shalimar Hospital. I know it says Shalimar elective form, but this is from a few years ago when we only did it at Shalimar Hospital. If there's any specific hospitals that you're interested in, then you can put that on the form. Otherwise, we're in the process of securing a different sort of a wider array of, I think, 4 or 5 hospitals. So when you apply, we'll let you know what the different hospitals are and what each specialty that each hospital provides. But at Shalimar Hospital, they provided, I think there were about sort of 15 or so specialties, from sort of ophthalmology through to cardiology and endocrinology and all sorts.
Thank you so much. If there's no more questions, we will let you get on with your evening.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you once again for this talk. It's been really, really helpful, really insightful. So yeah.
Thanks a lot for having me. And I look forward to hopefully organising an elective for some of you.
Thank you.
That's all right.